With 2018 behind us, I thought it would be fun to look ahead at 2019. 2018 offered so many awesome new fighting games. Personally, I'm very hopeful that 2019 offers even more. So here are some fighting games that I will be looking forward to in 2019. To be clear, I'm not going to be including Jump Force or the Kill la Kill game on here because they're arena fighters and not necessarily what people expect when they click on a video like this. Although I will say I'm very excited about Jump Force, less so about Kill la Kill because I don't know much about the series. So let's dive into the already announced games for 2019, starting with Mortal Kombat 11. This game is by far the fighting game I'm looking forward to most in 2019. I loved Injustice 2 to my core, and it's the game that got my channel started. The gear system added something for players who aren't interested in the competitive scene, which I personally think is very important, but this time around, I will be trying out the competitive scene. I might even go to some tournaments here and there. We'll see how it goes. Dead or Alive 6. Personally, I've never cared for Dead or Alive, and I can't say that I intend to pick this one up, but I'm sure that the DOA fanbase is very happy to finally be getting a new title. Fantasy Strike. Fantasy Strike is finally set to launch this year. The game is genuinely impressive. I've talked about this game in the past, but in short, it's basically a very simple and easy to pick up fighting game that anyone can play. Despite that, high-level gameplay is very competitive. I do have my slight issues with some of the mechanics, but it's easy to ignore some of those slightly annoying mechanics because the end result is a fantastic simplified fighting game that anyone can play, and it's hard to see that as a bad thing. Fight of Gods. I'll be honest, I don't know much about this one, so I'm not going to give my first impressions publicly because I don't want to say anything bad about the game that isn't true. I will say aesthetically, it's really different. So if you're into that, this one could be for you. But remember that this is an indie title, so you may struggle to find games. Granblue Versus. What can I say? It's an Arc Systems title. It's probably going to be incredible. I can't wait to hear more about the game. Sadly, the information is very limited right now. What we do know about the title, or what I know about the title at the very least, is that it's based on Granblue, which is a fairly popular franchise in Japan. It won't have complex combos, and I think they've even confirmed that there are no motion inputs, although I could be entirely wrong about that, so please don't quote me on it. So that's it for announced titles for 2019, so let's move on to some more rumored titles. The remainder of this video is going to be games that aren't announced yet, so it's going to be basically speculation. So some of these games, if they do get announced in 2019, won't necessarily release in 2019, but regardless, they've got something to do with 2019 at the very least. I'm very hopeful to hear about some of these games. A Persona 5 fighting game. Atlus has officially announced that they're working on a new project called Persona 5R. We know nothing about it. It could easily just be a re-release of Persona 5 with a little bit of new content. Most Persona 5 content creators think this is a strong possibility, but are also holding out hope for Persona 5R being the Persona 5 fighting game that people have been waiting for. Even if specifically Persona 5R isn't the fighting game, the trailer that announced said project, Persona 5R, had a logo that said something along the lines of Persona 5 new projects, as in plural. I would be genuinely surprised if a Persona 5 fighting game wasn't in the works somewhere. But on the same hand, I don't think it's actually going to be made by Arc System Works. Arc System Works is just so busy right now. I don't see it being possible for them to create a new Persona game, but I've been surprised before. A Riot Games fighting game. It's fairly possible that Riot Games, the creator of League of Legends, is working on a fighting game. For those not in a loop, Riot Games bought out a company who was working on Rising Thunder. Their name was Radiant Entertainment. The lead developer who worked on said fighting game now works at Riot Games and does not work on League of Legends, the only digital game that Riot Games has. When asked about what he is working on, he simply says something along the lines of, I work at Riot Games and I like fighting games. Based on that alone, and a few other pieces of evidence here and there, it seems fairly reasonable to me that Riot is working on something. And at this point, I feel like it's fairly easy to assume that it will be a fighting game. Very excited to see what Riot Games decides to bring to the genre. So there you go. There's two rumored titles that I think are the most likely to be announced in 2019. The Riot game could be announced at any point because we have no idea anything about it. But I do think if a Persona 5 fighting game is happening, it will be announced this year. So let's move on to some more hypothetical games. There's no evidence behind any of these games, but we're just going to talk about them because they would be cool. Well, there's a little bit of evidence for some of them, but not enough that I would consider them rumored. Starting off with a Blizzard fighting game. Someone important at Blizzard clearly likes fighting games because they've teased on a handful of occasions that Blizzard could be working on a fighting game. Between the arcades in Overwatch showing off a Blizzard fighting game and an April Fool's joke a few years back, which heavily implied a Blizzard fighting game was happening. None of these ended up coming to fruition, but it's been a while since Blizzard has announced a new title. I'm not necessarily assuming it would happen this year, but I'm sure at some point Blizzard will dip their toes in the genre and I will be there waiting to refresh the page as soon as I can pre-order it, assuming it's not a free-to-play game. Darkstalkers. I've never had a chance to play a Darkstalkers game. Considering the massive flop that was Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite and the fact that they're continuing to support Street Fighter V, one would assume that Capcom is working on something new. Something not Marvel vs. Capcom related, and why not a Darkstalkers game? It's been 16 years since the last brand new Darkstalkers game. Well, 16 years or so, I'm not actually sure of the exact number, but regardless. So perhaps it's time to bring back the franchise. Alternatively, Capcom could be working on a Marvel-specific fighting game. I've been saying for a long time that they should just abandon the Capcom side of Marvel vs. Capcom. Marvel at this point is obviously a much larger draw than Capcom, and starting a brand new franchise to kind of get yourself away from Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, I think would be a wise strategy as far as marketing is concerned. And finally, whatever the heck Team Blue is working on. For those out of the loop, Arc System Works has two fighting game teams, Team Red and Team Blue. Team Red is the one that handles the 2.5D games like Dragon Ball FighterZ, Guilty Gear, and now the brand new Granblue game. And of course, Team Blue is the one that handles games like BlazBlue. But the question is, what are they working on now? After BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle has announced that it's going to be getting more DLC, we haven't heard anything. My dream is that Team Blue is working on a Ruby fighting game, and if that's the case, we probably won't hear about that for a long time. I'm fully aware of how unlikely that is, but whatever they're working on, I'm sure it will be fantastic, and I'm fully on board with whatever it is. So that's it for my list of 2019 fighting games to look out for. Just to run through the list again, we did Mortal Kombat 11, Dead or Alive 6, Fantasy Strike Fight of Gods, Granblue versus some rumored titles, Persona 5 fighting game, a Riot Games fighting game, and some more hypothetical titles, a Blizzard fighting game, a Darkstalkers game, and whatever the heck Team Blue is working on. I want to thank you so much for watching this video. I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like. It helps other people find it. My name has been Bilbzy, and I will see you in the next video.